In the previous lesson, we copied over our JSX from our class-based app component to our new function-based app with hooks component. The only issue with that is that we still have plenty of references to the this keyword, as well as component instance methods that no longer exist within our function ecosystem. So for example, here on line 22, we still have the old reference to this.handle mode change, and obviously we no longer have a handle mode change instance method to reference. So in this lesson, we're going to start to refactor this code to now utilize JavaScript constructs that we can utilize within a function paradigm, right? So when we were first learning about event handlers, we saw that we could provide an arrow function directly in line, and the same rules will apply here. So rather than referencing a method, I can provide a function. It's the same idea at the end of the day because it represents a procedure. It's some bit of code to run whenever the user interacts with that given element. In this case, it's the code to run whenever the user toggles the switch. So here, instead of referencing this.handle mode change, I'm just going to provide an arrow function in line. And in the body of this arrow function, we can do whatever logic we want. So what do we want to happen whenever the user clicks the switch? We want to alter the login mode of our form. Remember, that is coming from a piece of state right here called login mode, but the way that we update that piece of state is with the complementary function that is the second element in the array that the useState hook returns. So right here, I'll obviously want to use set login mode. And what I provide to that function is the next value of that piece of state. So I obviously don't want to do login mode because that would simply provide the current value of that Boolean. It would be true or it would be false, and it would always be the same. What I want to do when the user clicks the toggle is take my current login mode Boolean, invert it, or in other words, get the reverse, and set that as the next state of my login mode. So I'm going to take whatever is my current value of login mode, and I'm going to flip it with the exclamation mark, and then I'm going to use the set login mode to set that as the next value for the login mode property or the login mode piece of state. And of course, as we know, whenever that happens, the component will re-render because state has changed. Now, it's very important that you don't do this. You don't want to write this code like so, because what this is going to do is directly run set login mode whenever the component renders, and that's not going to return a function, that's going to return something, maybe undefined. The point is that the onChange prop to the switch component needs a function. It needs a procedure that it will run at some point in the future. This is not a procedure that will run. This is a direct call to change the value of the login mode state property. We don't want to do it when the component renders. We want to do it when the user clicks on the switch, which is what is handled by the onChange prop. So very important to remember, we still need to provide a function here. The function describes what will happen when the switch is toggled. All right. Same principle is going to apply to a couple use cases below. So we do have the use of the this keyword on our form submit handler, but we're going to skip that in this lesson and come back to it a little bit later. What I want to focus on now is our three inputs. So right here, where we have our input for the email address, we formerly referenced a handle email change instance method that no longer exists, but no problem. We can provide an arrow function in line. And as we know, React will automatically generate a synthetic event object and pass that in to whatever we provide here. It doesn't matter whether it's an inline arrow function or a method. React will always provide that event object as the first parameter. So right here, I can reference that event object. And of course, on that event object, I can access .target.value to get the actual entry that the user has provided. But the question is, what do I want to do with that entry? Well, I want to set that as my next state value for my email state, right? So scrolling up here, once again, we have email for the actual value itself, whatever it currently is. And then we have set email as the setter function, as the function that will set the next value of that piece of state. So right here, what I want to do is when the user enters a character and triggers the onChange event handler, then I'm going to say run this function, and in the body of this function, we're going to use our set email setter function and then give it the next value of that state property, which of course is going to come from event.target.value. So when the user writes a character, We're going to run this function. We're going to use set email to update the email state property. That will trigger a component re-render. And then this value right here on line 40 will be updated with the current value of the email state property, which in turn will render that additional character in the input field in the browser. So the entire concept of state is actually flowing through React. We're first updating React and its local state, and that is what is going to, in turn, update the input field and what the user sees through the use of the value attribute or the value prop. You can use either terminology. So in other words, we're kind of relaying the message to React, and then React is sending that message back to the input form. That is the flow of events throughout this procedure. With that said, the logic remains the same. Instead of providing a method, we provide an inline arrow function that uses one of our setter functions from useState to update the state value that we care about. We care about email here, so we want to use the setEmail function. The same rules are going to apply below. So here for the this.handlePasswordChange method that no longer exists, I'm going to replace this with an arrow function. React is going to give me the event object. And here what I'm going to do in the body of that function is use setPassword. That is the setter function for the password piece of state that I care about. Once again, I'm going to give it event.target.value. Now, one thing to note here is that we could certainly wrap setPassword in curly braces. We are using ES6's implicit return syntax here, but I don't believe that any of these setter functions return anything significant, and it doesn't really matter because onChange doesn't care about it. OnChange just needs a function to run on change. It doesn't care what the return value of that function is. So the fact that we're using implicit returns here is not going to hurt us in any way. But if you want to, wrap this in curly braces, totally fine as well. As long as you run setPassword or the corresponding state setter function, you'll be just fine. Okay, and then the last thing we need to update, of course, is confirm password. So we're going to remove this form of reference. Once again, we can provide a function in here because we don't have the concept of methods within our function component. We can decide, or not decide, but know that React will give us an event object. And then what I want to do with that event object is get its target.value property and use it to set the next value for a given state property. What state property do I care about here? I care about this one right here. So that piece of state is going to have confirm password as the name for the current value, and then the setter to set the next value of that piece of state is called setConfirmPassword. Once again, we chose these names, so it's up to us whatever name we give it, as long as we utilize that correct name down below. So we call this setConfirmPassword. So right here, I'm going to say when the user types a character, use the setConfirmPassword function, invoke that to update the confirm password piece of state. And what do I want to be the next value for that state? I want it to come from event.target.value. And save that. And that's all there is to cover in this lesson. So with just a few quick modifications, we now have replaced just about all the references to the this keyword throughout our new functional component with hooks. Now, because we are still referencing this right here, this component will still not render correctly in the browser. You should see either a blank white page or an error screen. Don't worry, we are where we're supposed to be, and I promise we're going to get to a working prototype very soon. That's all there is to cover in this lesson, so I will see you in the next one.